On the morning of October 13, 1923, the groundskeeper at Ravenwood Manor discovered something that would send shockwaves through high society and baffle investigators for decades to come. The entire Cartwright family, one of America's most powerful industrial dynasties, had vanished without a trace during an elaborate dinner party, attended by 43 of the nation's elite. 12 family members, ranging in age from 6 to 78, simply disappeared from a locked mansion, while their guests continued celebrating in the adjacent ballroom, completely unaware that their hosts had ceased to exist. What began as the social event of the season became the most perplexing mystery in American history. No signs of struggle, no ransom demands, no bodies ever recovered. The Cartwright fortune, estimated at over $200 million, remains unclaimed to this day. The family's industrial empire collapsed overnight, and their massive estate became a monument to one of the most impossible disappearances ever recorded. Before we dive into this extraordinary case that challenges everything we think we know about the limits of human planning and the power of secrets, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our investigations into history's most baffling mysteries. Let us know in the comments what you think happened to the Cartwrights, and don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves unsolved mysteries as much as you do. The Cartwright dynasty began in 1847 when Irish immigrant Patrick Cartwright arrived in Pittsburgh with nothing but determination and an engineering mind that would revolutionize American industry. Patrick's innovations in steel production and railroad construction made him incredibly wealthy, but it was his son, Benjamin Cartwright, who transformed the family business into an industrial empire that spanned coast to coast. By 1920, Cartwright Industries controlled vast networks of steel mills, coal mines, railroad lines, and shipping companies. Their influence extended far beyond business into politics, where 3 generations of Cartwrights had served in Congress, and Benjamin Cartwright's brother-in-law was rumored to be President Harding's closest advisor. The family's wealth was legendary, their political connections immense, and their social standing unquestionable. Benjamin Cartwright, patriarch of the dynasty at the time of the disappearance, was 78 years old and widely regarded as one of the most powerful men in America. Despite his advanced age, he maintained iron control over both the family business and the extensive Cartwright clan. His decisions shaped markets, his recommendations influenced government policy, and his approval was essential for anyone seeking to advance in industrial or political circles. Ravenwood Manor, the family's ancestral home, sprawled across 800 acres of manicured grounds in the Allegheny Mountains of western Pennsylvania. The mansion itself was a Gothic revival masterpiece, containing over 100 rooms, including a ballroom that could accommodate 200 guests, a library housing one of the finest private collections in America, and living quarters luxurious enough to house visiting royalty. The estate was entirely self-sufficient, with its own power plant, water system, and telephone exchange connecting it to the outside world. The Cartwright family gathering of October 1923 was planned as a celebration of the 75th anniversary of Patrick Cartwright's arrival in America and the founding of what would become the industrial dynasty. Benjamin had summoned family members from across the country to participate in 3 days of festivities that would culminate in the elaborate dinner party on October 12th. 12 family members were in residence at Ravenwood Manor during the celebration. Benjamin and his wife Eleanor, married for 52 years, occupied the master suite. Their eldest son, William, age 53, had arrived with his wife Margaret and their twin daughters, Catherine and Carolyn, both 22. Benjamin's younger son, Thomas, age 48, brought his wife Sarah and their 3 children, Robert, 16, Elizabeth, 14, and young Patrick, named for his great-grandfather, who was only 6 years old. Also present were Benjamin's unmarried sister, Agnes, 71, who had devoted her life to managing the family's charitable foundations, and his nephew, James Cartwright, 38, a Harvard-educated lawyer who served as the family's legal counsel and handled their most sensitive business affairs. James had never married, dedicating himself entirely to protecting the family's interests and reputation. The guest list for the October 12th dinner party read like a roster of American power and influence. 43 individuals attended the event, including senators, congressmen, Supreme Court justices, industrial leaders, prominent clergy, and representatives of European nobility who maintained business relationships with Cartwright Industries. The dinner was planned as both a social celebration and a strategic gathering, where important business and political arrangements would be discussed in elegant surroundings. Mrs. Dorothy Hamilton, society columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, was among the invited guests and later provided detailed accounts of the evening's events. According to her observations, the dinner party proceeded normally throughout the evening, with the Cartwright family members serving as gracious hosts, engaging their guests in conversation about business, politics, and social matters. The family appeared to be in excellent spirits, Mrs. Hamilton later wrote. Benjamin Cartwright delivered a touching speech about his father's legacy and the family's commitment to American progress. Eleanor was radiant in her emerald silk gown, and the younger family members seemed genuinely delighted to be participating in such a significant family celebration. There was absolutely no indication that anything unusual was occurring or that any of them were experiencing distress of any kind. The dinner party followed a carefully planned schedule designed to showcase both the family's wealth and their sophistication. Cocktails were served in the main parlor from 6 to 7, followed by dinner in the formal dining room from 7:30 to 9:30. After dinner, guests were invited to move to the ballroom for dancing and continued socializing, while coffee and cigars were available in the library for those who preferred more intimate conversations. The family's routine during these events was well established and familiar to frequent guests. Benjamin and Eleanor typically remained in the ballroom throughout the evening, as their advanced age made extensive socializing tiring. The younger family members would circulate between the ballroom, library, and various parlors, ensuring that all guests received appropriate attention and that business conversations could proceed naturally. At approximately 10:15, Mrs. Hamilton noticed that she had not seen any family members for some time, though she initially attributed this to the large number of guests and the multiple entertainment areas available throughout the mansion. It was not until nearly 11 o'clock that Senator Charles Morrison mentioned to his wife that he had not encountered any of the Cartwrights for over an hour and was hoping to speak with Benjamin about a steel contract before departing. Mrs. Morrison suggested that the family might have retired to their private quarters to allow the guests to enjoy themselves without feeling obligated to continue hosting duties. This explanation seemed reasonable, as elderly hosts often withdrew from parties to rest while guests continued celebrating. However, Senator Morrison felt it would be inappropriate to leave without thanking his hosts personally for their hospitality. The senator asked one of the household staff to locate Benjamin Cartwright, explaining that he wished to offer his thanks before departing. The butler, Charles Henley, who had served the family for 37 years, assured Senator Morrison that he would find Mr. Cartwright immediately. Henley's search of the mansion's common areas failed to locate any family members, leading him to check their private residential quarters. What Henley discovered alarmed him greatly. The family's private dining room, where they often gathered after entertaining guests, was empty, but showed signs of a recently interrupted meal. Half-finished plates of food remained on the table, wine glasses stood partially filled, and newspapers lay open, as if the family had been dining and reading when something caused them to leave suddenly. Henley expanded his search to include all the family bedrooms, private parlors, and offices throughout the mansion. Every room was empty, but personal belongings remained exactly where they would normally be found. Jewelry lay on dressing tables, reading glasses rested beside open books, and clothing was arranged in wardrobes, as if the family expected to return momentarily. Growing increasingly concerned, Henley enlisted other household staff members to search the mansion's basement levels, attic spaces, and service areas. The search revealed no trace of any family member, but it did uncover something that deepened the mystery considerably. In Benjamin's private study, the family's personal safe stood open and empty, though there were no signs that it had been forced or damaged. Charles Henley faced an unprecedented dilemma. The Cartwright family had vanished from their own home during a party attended by some of the most powerful people in America. The implications of this disappearance, both for the family's business empire and for the guests' safety, were staggering. After consulting with the head groundskeeper and the estate's security supervisor, Henley decided to inform the guests that there appeared to be an emergency requiring immediate attention. The announcement that the Cartwright family could not be located sent shockwaves through the gathering. Senator Morrison immediately took charge. organizing the guests to assist in a more comprehensive search of the mansion and grounds. The guests, many of whom were close personal friends of the family, were deeply concerned about what might have happened to their hosts. Dr. Franklin Pierce, President Harding's personal physician who was attending the party, suggested that the family might have received urgent news requiring them to depart suddenly, perhaps related to a medical emergency or business crisis. However, this theory was quickly dismissed when Henley confirmed that no telephone calls had been received during the evening and no messages had been delivered to the family. The search conducted by the guests and household staff was thorough and systematic. Every room in the mansion was examined multiple times, including storage areas, wine cellars, and mechanical spaces that guests would never normally enter. The mansion's grounds were searched using lanterns and electric torches, covering gardens, outbuildings, and wooded areas where family members might have gone for privacy or fresh air. As the night progressed without any trace of the missing family, the reality of the situation became increasingly apparent to everyone present. 12 people had somehow vanished from a locked mansion, while 43 witnesses remained in the building. The doors had been monitored by staff throughout the evening, and no vehicles had been seen leaving the estate. The disappearance appeared to be impossible by any conventional explanation. At dawn on October 13th, Senator Morrison made the decision to contact federal authorities. The involvement of so many prominent government officials as witnesses, combined with the Cartwright family's importance to national industrial and political interests, made this a matter of national security rather than a simple local police investigation. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Director William Burns personally traveled to Ravenwood Manor to oversee the investigation. Burns, a legendary detective who had solved some of the most complex criminal cases in American history, assembled a team of the nation's most experienced investigators to examine every aspect of the disappearance. The FBI's investigation began with detailed interviews of all 43 party guests. Each person was asked to provide a complete account of their interactions with family members throughout the evening, noting specific times, locations, and topics of conversation. The goal was to establish a precise timeline, showing when each family member was last seen and where they had been located. The timeline that emerged was both detailed and baffling. Benjamin Cartwright had been seen in the ballroom as late as 9:45, engaged in conversation with railroad executive Harrison Dodge about expansion of Western rail lines. Eleanor Cartwright had been observed in the library at 9:50, discussing literature with the wife of the German ambassador. The younger family members had been circulating throughout the mansion until approximately 10 o'clock, when several guests reported seeing them gathered in the main hallway, apparently engaged in some kind of family conference. William Cartwright had been speaking quietly with his brother Thomas, while their wives supervised the children, who appeared restless and eager to retire for the evening. James Cartwright, the family lawyer, had been the last family member definitely observed by multiple witnesses. Mrs. Hamilton and 2 other guests saw him walking toward the family's private quarters at approximately 10:10, carrying what appeared to be legal documents in a leather portfolio. He had nodded politely to the guests, but had not stopped to engage in conversation. After 10:15, no guest could definitively recall seeing any member of the Cartwright family. The transition was so gradual that no one had immediately noticed their absence, assuming that family members were simply in different areas of the large mansion or had retired to private quarters to rest. Director Burns focused considerable attention on the family's private quarters, where the evidence of interrupted activities suggested that something significant had occurred. The partially completed meal in the private dining room indicated that the family had gathered there after fulfilling their hosting duties, probably to discuss the evening's events and make plans for the following day's activities. The open and empty safe in Benjamin's study presented a particularly intriguing clue. The safe was a massive fireproof vault that required 2 separate combinations to open, known only to Benjamin and his son William. The fact that it had been opened without damage suggested that one of these men had accessed it voluntarily, but the reason for emptying it completely remained mysterious. Household staff members were interviewed extensively about their observations during the evening and their knowledge of the family's routines and concerns. Charles Henley, as the senior staff member who had served the family for decades, provided valuable insights into the family's normal behavior patterns and any recent changes that might be relevant to their disappearance. According to Henley, the family had seemed somewhat tense during the days leading up to the celebration, though he had attributed this to the stress of organizing such an elaborate event. Benjamin had been spending unusual amounts of time in his study, often working late into the night on correspondence and legal documents. Eleanor had seemed worried about something, but had not confided her concerns to the household staff. The children had been more subdued than usual, particularly the teenagers, Robert and Elizabeth, who normally enjoyed the excitement of family gatherings and the presence of distinguished guests. Young Patrick, only 6 years old, had asked several times when they would be going home, despite the fact that Ravenwood Manor was their family's ancestral residence. James Cartwright had been particularly busy in the weeks before the celebration, traveling frequently to New York and Washington on family business. He had also been receiving numerous telephone calls and telegraph messages, many of which he handled personally rather than through the usual secretarial staff. His behavior suggested that he was dealing with matters of unusual importance or sensitivity. The FBI's technical investigation of the mansion revealed no evidence of forced entry, violence, or struggle. Every door and window was examined for signs of tampering, and the mansion's extensive security measures showed no indication of having been compromised. The estate's guard dogs had not been agitated during the night, and the night watchman reported no unusual sounds or activities. The investigation of the grounds was equally thorough, but unproductive. Bloodhounds were brought in to track any scents leading away from the mansion, but they found no trails indicating that anyone had left the building on foot. The estate's vehicular access points were examined for tire tracks or other evidence of departing vehicles, but no such evidence was discovered. Director Burns expanded the investigation to include examination of the family's business and financial affairs, recognizing that the Cartwrights' immense wealth and political influence might have made them targets for sophisticated criminal enterprises. Teams of agents reviewed banking records, business correspondence, and investment portfolios, looking for evidence of threats, blackmail, or financial pressures that might explain the disappearance. The financial investigation revealed that Cartwright Industries was facing significant challenges that had not been publicly disclosed. Several major contracts had been cancelled unexpectedly, key business partnerships were under strain, and competitors were aggressively challenging the company's market positions. The family's personal finances remained substantial, but the business empire was experiencing difficulties that could threaten its long-term stability. More troubling was the discovery that Benjamin Cartwright had been quietly liquidating various investments and converting assets to cash and negotiable securities over the several months preceding the disappearance. Bank records showed substantial withdrawals and transfers that suggested the family patriarch was preparing for some kind of major change in their circumstances. James Cartwright's legal activities also came under scrutiny. The family lawyer had been revising wills, updating trust documents, and establishing new financial arrangements that would provide family members with immediate access to substantial funds if needed. These preparations suggested that the family was anticipating some kind of crisis or major life change. The investigation also revealed that Benjamin Cartwright had been receiving threatening letters from various sources, including labor organizers angry about working conditions in Cartwright Industries facilities, business competitors seeking to damage the company's reputation, and individuals who blamed the family for various economic problems affecting their communities. While most of these threats appeared to be the usual complaints that wealthy industrialists received regularly, several letters stood out for their specific knowledge of family routines and their detailed descriptions of potential harm that could befall family members. The FBI traced these threatening communications, but found that they originated from untraceable sources using false identities. 3 weeks into the investigation, Director Burns faced the uncomfortable reality that traditional investigative methods were producing no useful leads. The disappearance appeared to have been accomplished without leaving any physical evidence, witnesses, or logical explanation. The FBI had never encountered a case where so many people could vanish so completely from such a secure location. Burns decided to approach the case from a different angle, focusing on the question of whether the disappearance might have been voluntary rather than the result of criminal action. If the Cartwright family had planned their own disappearance, They would have needed to overcome enormous logistical challenges while maintaining absolute secrecy from both household staff and party guests. The voluntary disappearance theory gained credibility when investigators discovered a hidden room in the mansion's basement that had been constructed recently but was not shown on any architectural plans. The room was accessed through a concealed entrance behind a wine rack and contained supplies that would be useful for extended travel: clothing, non-perishable food, medical supplies, and communication equipment. The room also contained documents that provided insights into the family's mindset during the weeks before their disappearance. Personal letters between family members discussed fears about their safety and concerns about the stability of their business empire. The correspondence suggested that they were aware of multiple threats to their security and had been developing contingency plans for protecting themselves and their wealth. Eleanor Cartwright had written to her sister in Boston, expressing concerns about dangerous people who wished to harm our family, and mentioning that Benjamin was making arrangements to ensure our safety if circumstances required drastic action. The letter was dated 2 weeks before the disappearance, but had never been mailed, suggesting that Eleanor had decided against sharing these concerns with relatives outside the immediate family. William Cartwright had documented conversations with private security consultants about methods for protecting wealthy families from kidnapping and extortion. His notes included detailed discussions of escape routes, safe houses, and techniques for disappearing completely when faced with credible threats to family safety. Thomas Cartwright's papers included correspondence with banks in Switzerland and South America, discussing the establishment of accounts that could be accessed without revealing the depositors' identities. These arrangements would have allowed the family to access substantial funds while living under assumed identities in foreign countries. The most revealing discovery was James Cartwright's legal research into methods for abandoning American citizenship and establishing new identities in countries that did not have extradition treaties with the United States. His work suggested that the family was prepared to leave America permanently if necessary to protect themselves from unspecified dangers. Dr. Amanda Sheffield, a psychiatrist who consulted with the FBI on cases involving unusual human behavior, analyzed the evidence and concluded that the Cartwright family had been experiencing what she termed persecution anxiety, a psychological condition affecting wealthy individuals who become convinced that their success has made them targets for various forms of attack. The Cartwrights appear to have developed an elaborate belief system about threats to their safety that may or may not have been based on genuine dangers, Dr. Sheffield reported. Their preparations for disappearance were extensive and sophisticated, suggesting months or even years of planning. The family seems to have convinced themselves that vanishing completely was their only option for ensuring their continued survival and security. The FBI's investigation ultimately identified what Burns believed was the most likely explanation for the disappearance. The Cartwright family had spent months planning a voluntary escape from what they perceived as mounting threats to their safety and business empire. The October 12th dinner party provided the perfect cover for their disappearance, as the presence of so many distinguished guests would delay discovery and complicate any pursuit. The family's plan appeared to have involved using the hidden basement room as a staging area where they could change clothes, gather prepared supplies, and access an escape route that bypassed the mansion's normal security measures. The exact method of their departure remained unclear, but investigators theorized that they might have used underground passages connecting to outbuildings where vehicles could be concealed. The timing of their escape was carefully calculated to occur when guests would be occupied with dancing and socializing, making their absence less noticeable. The family gathering in the hallway around 10 o'clock, observed by several guests, might have been their final coordination meeting before implementing their escape plan. James Cartwright's legal documents and the empty safe suggested that the family had converted their wealth into portable assets that could be transported easily and accessed from foreign locations. The recent changes to wills and trusts would have ensured that their business empire could continue operating under the control of appointed trustees, protecting their employees and business partners from immediate harm. However, Director Burns acknowledged that significant aspects of the disappearance remained unexplained. The family's ability to vanish from a mansion under constant observation by household staff and guests required either extraordinary planning or assistance from individuals who were never identified. The complete absence of physical evidence suggested a level of sophistication that challenged the limits of what seemed possible for a voluntary disappearance. The case of the vanishing Cartwright dynasty had profound impacts on American business and society. Cartwright Industries faced immediate financial crisis as banks called in loans, business partners cancelled contracts, and competitors moved aggressively to capture market share. Within 6 months, the industrial empire that had taken 3 generations to build was largely dismantled and sold to satisfy creditors. The political implications were equally significant. Several government officials who had close relationships with the Cartwrights faced congressional investigations examining whether classified information had been shared inappropriately with the family. President Harding's administration was already weakened by various scandals, and the suggestion that one of his advisors might have vanished under mysterious circumstances further damaged his political standing. The social impact of the disappearance reverberated throughout American high society. Wealthy families across the country increased their security measures and began developing their own contingency plans for protecting themselves from perceived threats. The idea that even the most powerful and well-protected family in America could simply vanish overnight created widespread anxiety among the elite. Mrs. Dorothy Hamilton continued investigating the Cartwright disappearance for the remainder of her journalism career, publishing numerous articles and eventually a book examining the case. Her research uncovered additional evidence supporting the voluntary disappearance theory, including sightings of individuals resembling family members in various foreign countries over the years following their vanishing. I became convinced that the Cartwrights succeeded in accomplishing the impossible, Mrs. Hamilton wrote in her 1955 memoir. They escaped from their old lives completely and established new identities somewhere in the world. Whether they remained together as a family or separated to ensure their security, I believe they achieved their goal of disappearing from American society permanently. Charles Henley, the family's longtime butler, refused to accept that his employers had abandoned their heritage and responsibilities voluntarily. Until his death in 1941, he maintained Ravenwood Manor in perfect condition, convinced that the family would eventually return to reclaim their ancestral home. His dedication to preserving the mansion and its contents provided valuable evidence for investigators who continued studying the case. The estate remained in legal limbo for decades, as courts attempted to determine whether the family should be declared legally dead or whether their disappearance constituted abandonment of their property. The mansion was eventually converted into a museum, showcasing the lifestyle of America's industrial barons, with special exhibits dedicated to the mystery of the family's vanishing. Dr. Sheffield's psychological analysis of the case influenced the development of new therapeutic approaches for wealthy individuals experiencing persecution anxiety and related conditions. Her work demonstrated how extreme wealth and power could create psychological pressures that led to seemingly irrational decisions, including the abandonment of everything that had previously defined a family's identity and purpose. The FBI's investigation techniques developed during the Cartwright case became standard procedures for missing persons investigations involving wealthy or prominent individuals. The case demonstrated the importance of examining financial records, communication patterns, and psychological factors when traditional physical evidence was unavailable. Director Burns never publicly declared the case closed, maintaining hope that additional evidence might eventually explain the remaining mysteries surrounding the disappearance. In his private notes, discovered after his death, Burns expressed frustration that such an elaborate investigation had failed to provide definitive answers about what happened to 12 people who simply vanished from existence. Modern investigators and amateur detectives continue studying the Cartwright case, using advanced analytical techniques to examine evidence that was preserved from the original investigation. Computer modeling and psychological profiling have provided new insights into the family's possible motivations and methods, but the fundamental mystery remains unsolved. Some researchers have suggested that the Cartwrights might have had assistance from government agencies that were concerned about protecting American industrial secrets from foreign competitors. This theory proposes that the family's disappearance was actually a sophisticated witness protection operation designed to prevent valuable technology and business intelligence from falling into the wrong hands. Other investigators have focused on the possibility that the family was eliminated by criminal organizations seeking to gain control of their business empire. According to this theory, the sophisticated nature of the disappearance was designed to prevent discovery of the bodies and to create the impression that the family had left voluntarily, thereby avoiding intensive criminal investigation. The truth about what happened to the Cartwright dynasty on that October night in 1923 may never be fully known. What is certain is that 12 people managed to vanish completely from one of the most secure locations in America while under the observation of 43 witnesses, leaving behind an industrial empire, a vast fortune, and one of the most perplexing mysteries in American history. The case challenges our understanding of what is possible when unlimited resources are combined with desperate motivation and meticulous planning. Whether the Cartwrights succeeded in escaping to new lives under assumed identities, or whether they met a more sinister fate, their disappearance remains a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the enduring mystery of what people will do when they believe their survival is at stake. As we reflect on the vanishing of the Cartwright dynasty, we must consider the broader implications of a case that demonstrated how even the most powerful and seemingly secure individuals can feel compelled to abandon everything they have built when faced with perceived threats to their safety and freedom. Their story serves as a reminder that wealth and influence cannot always protect against the fears and anxieties that drive human behavior, even when those fears lead to decisions that seem incomprehensible to outside observers. The empty rooms of Ravenwood Manor stand as monuments to a family that chose mystery over certainty, obscurity over prominence, and the unknown dangers of new identities over the familiar threats of their established lives. Whether they found the peace and security they sought in their vanishing, or whether they discovered that some problems cannot be solved by running away, remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. In the end, the Cartwright dynasty disappeared not through business failure or political scandal, but through their own deliberate choice to cease existing as the people they had always been. Their legacy lives on not in the industrial empire they abandoned, but in the enduring question of how far people will go to protect what they value most, even if it means sacrificing everything that once defined their identity and purpose in the world. The investigation into the Cartwright disappearance continued for decades, with new leads emerging periodically from around the world. In 1931, a wealthy American family matching the Cartwrights' description was reported to be living in a remote estate in Argentina, speaking Spanish fluently and claiming to be refugees from the Russian Revolution. The local authorities investigated, but found no conclusive evidence linking these individuals to the missing Pennsylvania dynasty. 3 years later, similar reports surfaced from Brazil, where a large family had purchased extensive coffee plantations using what appeared to be American currency converted through Swiss banks. The family patriarch was described as an elderly man with distinctive features resembling Benjamin Cartwright, but attempts to verify his identity were unsuccessful due to the family's reclusive lifestyle and influential local connections. Perhaps the most intriguing lead came in 1939, when a dying man in a Buenos Aires hospital claimed to be James Cartwright and requested that his confession be forwarded to American authorities. The man, known locally as Santiago Castillo, had lived in Argentina for 16 years and operated a successful legal practice serving the expatriate American community. According to his deathbed statement, the Cartwright family had indeed escaped voluntarily from Ravenwood Manor, using an elaborate plan that had taken 3 years to develop and implement. The confession described underground passages connecting the mansion to a system of natural caves that extended for miles through the mountainous terrain surrounding the estate. Castillo claimed that the family had used these passages to reach a concealed airfield, where a privately owned aircraft was waiting to transport them to Canada. From there, they had traveled by ship to South America, where new identities and substantial financial resources were already in place. The confession provided specific details about the escape route and the locations of caches containing supplies and equipment. However, When FBI agents traveled to Argentina to investigate Castillo's claims, they discovered that he had been cremated immediately after his death, eliminating any possibility of using physical evidence to confirm his identity. The legal practice he had operated showed no records predating 1925, and colleagues described him as a secretive man who never discussed his past or family background. The investigation of Castillo's escape route claims proved equally frustrating. Extensive searches of the Ravenwood Manor basement and surrounding terrain failed to locate the underground passages he had described. Geological surveys indicated that the rock formations in the area would make such extensive tunneling extremely difficult and expensive, though not entirely impossible for someone with unlimited financial resources. The airfield Castillo mentioned was never located, despite aerial surveys covering hundreds of square miles around the estate. However, investigators did discover that several small private aircraft had been reported missing from airfields in Pennsylvania and neighboring states during the weeks preceding the Cartwright disappearance, though no connection to the family was ever established. Dr. Margaret Stevens, a historian who specializes in cases of voluntary disappearance among wealthy families, spent 15 years researching the Cartwright case and developed what she considers the most plausible explanation for their vanishing. According to Dr. Stevens, the family's disappearance was motivated not by external threats, but by internal family dynamics and psychological pressures that had been building for years. The Cartwright family was trapped by their own success, Dr. Stevens explains in her comprehensive study of the case. Benjamin's iron control over the family business and personal lives had created enormous stress among the younger generations, who felt suffocated by expectations and responsibilities they never chose for themselves. The disappearance may have been their collective solution to escaping from lives that had become prisons of privilege and obligation. Dr. Stevens' research revealed evidence of significant tension within the Cartwright family during the months preceding their disappearance. William and Thomas Cartwright had both expressed interest in pursuing careers outside the family business, interests that Benjamin had firmly rejected. The younger family members, particularly the teenagers, had been showing signs of rebellion against the strict social expectations that governed their lives. Eleanor Cartwright's private correspondence, discovered in a bank safety deposit box years after the disappearance, revealed her deep unhappiness with the isolated and regimented lifestyle that wealth and social position had imposed on the family. She wrote extensively about feeling like a prisoner in her own home, constantly watched by staff and scrutinized by society for any sign of impropriety or weakness. The correspondence also revealed Eleanor's growing fears about the violence and labor unrest that were affecting Cartwright Industries facilities across the country. Several family members had received direct threats from radical labor organizers, and there had been attempts to bomb Cartwright properties in Pennsylvania and Colorado. Eleanor's letters suggest that she believed the family was in genuine physical danger from multiple sources. James Cartwright's role in the family's disappearance may have been more complex than initially understood. Recent examination of his legal practice records, which became available to researchers only in the 1980s, revealed that he had been secretly investigating methods for dissolving Cartwright Industries and distributing its assets to employees and communities affected by the company's operations. These investigations suggest that James may have been planning to help the family escape, not only from personal dangers, but also from the moral burden of continuing to operate an industrial empire that was causing significant social and environmental damage. His legal research included detailed studies of corporate dissolution procedures and worker ownership models that could have transformed Cartwright Industries into employee-owned cooperatives. The moral dimension of the Cartwright disappearance adds another layer of complexity to an already mysterious case. If James Cartwright's research is accurately interpreted, the family may have vanished as part of a larger plan to atone for what they perceived as the harmful effects of their business empire on American society. This interpretation is supported by evidence that substantial anonymous donations were made to labor organizations, environmental groups, and community development projects in areas where Cartwright Industries had operated. The donations, totaling millions of dollars, were made through Swiss banks and offshore financial institutions that concealed the donors' identities. The timing of these donations, which began appearing in 1924 and continued for several decades, suggests that the Cartwright family may have spent their years in exile working to repair the damage they believed their business practices had caused. This would explain their willingness to abandon their wealth and social position in favor of anonymous philanthropy and quiet lives under assumed identities. Father Michael O'Brien, a Catholic priest who ministered to immigrant communities in Argentina during the 1930s and 1940s, reported encounters with a wealthy American family whose behavior and charitable activities were consistent with the Cartwright family's possible presence in South America. The family, known locally as the Carlyles, had established schools, hospitals, and agricultural cooperatives in remote areas where their work would benefit the poor without attracting attention from authorities or journalists. According to Father O'Brien's memoir, published in 1967, the Carlyle family patriarch spoke frequently about the responsibility of wealth to serve those who had been harmed by industrial development. The elderly man, whom Father O'Brien described as bearing a striking resemblance to newspaper photographs of Benjamin Cartwright, had extensive knowledge of American business practices and seemed driven by what the priest characterized as profound guilt about past actions. The Carlyle family's charitable work in Argentina continued for more than 20 years, according to Father O'Brien's account. They funded the construction of infrastructure projects, provided medical care in underserved areas, and established educational programs that helped indigenous communities preserve their cultural traditions while adapting to modern economic conditions. The family's members were described as highly educated and cultured individuals who spoke Spanish fluently but retained distinctly American mannerisms and cultural references. They lived modestly despite their obvious wealth, avoiding social events and public recognition while focusing entirely on their philanthropic activities. Father O'Brien's memoir also includes descriptions of the younger Carlyle family members, whose ages and appearances were consistent with the Cartwright children, who would have grown to adulthood during their years in exile. These individuals reportedly became prominent in various professional fields, including medicine, education, and social work, always maintaining low profiles while making significant contributions to their adopted communities. The priest's account suggests that the family maintained their close bonds despite the dramatic changes in their circumstances. They worked together on charitable projects, supported each other through personal challenges, and appeared to have found fulfillment in their new lives as anonymous benefactors rather than prominent industrialists. However, Father O'Brien also noted signs of ongoing sadness and loss among the family members, particularly the elderly patriarch, who seemed to carry enormous guilt about decisions made during his business career. The priest described conversations in which the old man spoke about the price of success and the difficulty of living with the knowledge that one's prosperity had been built on the suffering of others. The question of whether the Carlyle family was actually the vanished Cartwrights may never be definitively answered. Father O'Brien died in 1971, and the family he described disappeared from Argentina sometime in the late 1940s, possibly moving to another country where they could continue their work without attracting attention from researchers and journalists who were becoming increasingly interested in their activities. Recent advances in genealogical research and DNA analysis have provided new tools for investigating historical disappearances, but the Cartwright case presents unique challenges for these modern techniques. The family's deliberate efforts to obscure their identities, combined with the destruction of many relevant records during various political upheavals in South America, have made it extremely difficult to trace their possible descendants. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a genealogist who has spent 20 years researching the Cartwright case, believes that surviving family members or their descendants may still be living under assumed identities somewhere in the world. Her research has identified several families in various countries whose histories and characteristics are consistent with Cartwright descendants, but none has been definitively proven to be connected to the vanished dynasty. The Cartwrights were extraordinarily thorough in covering their tracks, Dr. Hoffman explains. They had unlimited resources, sophisticated legal advice, and years to plan their disappearance. If they wanted to vanish completely, they certainly had the means to accomplish that goal. The question is whether their descendants have maintained the same commitment to anonymity, or whether time has weakened their resolve to remain hidden. Dr. Hoffman's research has been complicated by the fact that many people have claimed to be Cartwright descendants over the years, hoping to gain access to the family's unclaimed fortune. These false claims have made it difficult to evaluate legitimate leads and have discouraged potential real descendants from coming forward with their stories. The legal status of the Cartwright fortune remains unresolved nearly a century after the family's disappearance. Various courts have wrestled with questions about when missing persons should be declared legally dead, how long unclaimed property should be held, and who has the right to make decisions about abandoned assets. The Cartwright estate, including Ravenwood Manor and the family's various business interests, was eventually placed under the control of court-appointed trustees who attempted to maintain the properties and investments while searching for surviving family members or legitimate heirs. However, the costs of maintenance and legal proceedings gradually consumed much of the estate's value over the decades. Today, the remnants of the Cartwright fortune are managed by a foundation that uses the remaining assets to support historical research and educational programs related to American industrial history. The foundation has funded numerous scholarly studies of the Cartwright case and maintains archives that are available to researchers investigating various aspects of the family's life and disappearance. Ravenwood Manor itself has been preserved as a historical landmark and museum, offering visitors the opportunity to explore the rooms where one of America's most powerful families spent their final hours before vanishing into history. The mansion's guided tours include detailed presentations about the disappearance, with special attention to the evidence that suggests the family planned their own escape from the pressures and dangers of their prominent position in American society. The basement room where investigators discovered evidence of the family's escape preparations has been restored to show how it might have appeared on the night of the disappearance. Visitors can see reproductions of the supplies, documents, and equipment that the family had assembled for their journey into exile, providing insights into the level of planning and resources that made their vanishing possible. The museum also includes exhibits examining the broader historical context of the Cartwright disappearance, including the social and economic tensions that affected wealthy families during the 1920s. These displays help visitors understand why a family might have felt compelled to abandon everything they had built in favor of anonymous lives in foreign countries. Educational programs at the museum explore themes of wealth, responsibility, and the psychological pressures that can affect prominent families. These programs are designed to help students and adults think critically about the relationship between success and happiness, and the ways that extreme wealth can create problems as well as opportunities. The Cartwright case continues to influence popular culture, inspiring numerous books, films, and television programs that explore themes of disappearance, identity, and the lengths to which people will go to escape from lives that have become unbearable. These fictional treatments often speculate about what might have happened to the family after their disappearance, and whether they found the peace and freedom they were seeking. However, most serious researchers agree that the real Cartwright story is more complex and poignant than any fictional adaptation could capture. The case represents a unique intersection of American industrial history, family psychology, and the universal human desire for freedom from obligation and expectation. Contemporary investigators continue to receive occasional tips and reports about possible Cartwright sightings or descendants, though none has provided convincing evidence of the family's fate. The enduring public interest in the case reflects not only fascination with an unsolved mystery, but also deeper questions about the price of success and the meaning of family loyalty in extreme circumstances. As we approach the centennial of the Cartwright disappearance, historians and investigators are preparing comprehensive reviews of all available evidence, hoping that new analytical techniques or previously overlooked clues might finally provide definitive answers about what happened to America's most prominent vanished family. The case continues to challenge our understanding of what is possible when unlimited resources are combined with desperate motivation and meticulous planning. Whether the Cartwrights found the peace and security they sought in their new lives, or whether they discovered that some problems cannot be solved by running away, their story remains a fascinating example of how even the most powerful people can choose to simply disappear when the burdens of their success become too heavy to bear. In studying the Cartwright disappearance, we are reminded that wealth and influence cannot always protect against the fears, pressures, and moral conflicts that drive human behavior. The family's choice to abandon everything they had built rather than continue living lives they found unbearable speaks to fundamental questions about the nature of success, the obligations of privilege, and the courage required to start over when existing circumstances become intolerable. The empty halls of Ravenwood Manor stand as a monument to a family that chose mystery over certainty, obscurity over prominence, and the unknown challenges of new identities over the familiar burdens of their established roles in American society. Their legacy reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of courage is not building an empire, but having the strength to walk away from everything when staying would compromise one's values or endanger one's family. Whether the Cartwright dynasty truly found the redemption and peace they were seeking in their years of exile, or whether their disappearance was itself another form of prison, may never be known. But their story continues to resonate with anyone who has ever felt trapped by success, burdened by expectations, or conflicted about the moral implications of their achievements. The Cartwright family's vanishing on that October night in 1923 represents more than just an unsolved mystery. It stands as a testament to the human capacity for radical change, the power of family unity in the face of impossible challenges, and the enduring hope that it is never too late to choose a different path, even when that path leads into the unknown and away from everything that once defined who we are.